Well, the big story today, depending on who you are, is either the fact that there was massive correspondence between slain DNC staffer Seth Rich with WikiLeaks people, or is it the anonymous source that said that Donald Trump gave away secrets when he met with the Russians at the White House that has been pushed back on? Well, it depends. If you are New York Times, ABC, CNN, BBC, CBS, NPR, The Hill, Politico, they're not interested at all in the Seth Rich story. But they've been talking all day about the story that has no sources, the story that says, well, we don't have any current or former government officials who have given us this information. Well, there weren't that many people at the meeting. But that's the story that sucked up all the news cycles. That story that came out 1 hour after Fox News broke an investigation story about the private investigator that had been hired by the family, saying that he knew of 43,053 emails, 17,761 attachments that had been sent by slain DNC staffer Seth Rich to Gavin McFadden, a man that had close links to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Gavin is also dead at the time, right? He subsequently died. It's interesting, isn't it? How many murders we see follow the Clintons. And of course, it's just circumstantial. It's just circumstantial that all those people surrounding them politically, people who know things about the Clintons, just happen to turn up. It's just unfortunate circumstances, isn't it? Just serendipitous for the Clintons that people who know things about them can no longer talk about them because they're deceased. And as they say on Breitbart, they point out the interesting thing here is the silence from the mainstream media about this. All these news outlets that I just reported to you. And the few that have covered it, like the Washington Post, as I point out, they waited 24 hours to publish anything about this. And then what they did was they published the family pushing back and saying, this is untrue. Or NBC that did cover it. They said DNC staffer's murder draws fresh conspiracy theories. And yet what it shows is that the conspiracy theory that we've been fed for about 10 months now, that the Russians hacked this, is falling apart. We're going to have an interview with Lee Stranahan, and we're going to show a different side of this, where he's followed the crowdsource narrative that's being pushed by the FBI, by former Director Comey. They are the sole source of the idea that the Russians hacked the DNC narrative, the DNC information. We've had a lot of people come out from WikiLeaks saying that, no, this was handed to us. And yet the mainstream media and the FBI are going to CrowdStrike. Who are they? They are the contractor for the DNC. They were the ones who were controlling their computer system. And they worked for Hillary Clinton indirectly. They're saying that the Russians hacked this information, and we've been saying all along, no, it was handed over. It wasn't even hacked. And then they took it a step farther, and they said the Russians hacked the election, implying that the Russians had gotten in and flipped voting machines. That was never the case. They said the Russians manipulated this narrative. They did it by grabbing electronically this information that came out of the DNC. And again, the only source on that is CrowdStrike. So we're going to talk about Lee Stranahan, who's followed this for a long time, who asked a question at a press conference last week at the White House, and the word CrowdStrike was stricken from the transcript. I think it's very interesting that there are people everywhere who do not want CrowdStrike mentioned. But let's look at what actually came out from Fox News. And this is this afternoon as the family of slain DNC staffer Seth Rich blasts the detective over the report of the WikiLeaks link. The family said that Rod Wheeler, a retired Washington homicide detective and Fox News contributor investigating the case on behalf of the family, said that he was stepping over the line. They said, we don't want this to become a conspiracy theory. They said this is unsubstantiated. And what he tweeted out was, he said, my investigation up to this point shows there was some degree of email exchange between Seth Rich and WikiLeaks. It's very specific about the number of emails, the number of attachments, and so forth. But the family is pushing back on this. And I have to ask, if this was your son who was killed, would you not want to explore every avenue of investigation? We've said this before. What is a conspiracy theory? Well, a conspiracy theory, and of course, conspiracy charges are some of the most frequently leveled charges in a criminal investigation. All that means is that more than one person was involved in a crime. But when you're looking at a crime, what do? You always come up with theories, and then you test those theories against the facts. They're saying, we don't want to hear anything about this. They say those interested in pushing conspiracy theories will stop at nothing to do so. However, an FBI forensic report of Rich's computer, generated within 96 hours after Rich's murder, showed that he made contact with WikiLeaks through Gavin McFadden, a now deceased American investigative reporter and documentary filmmaker and director of WikiLeaks, who was living in London at the time. So now we have FBI forensic report within 96 hours, this is Fox News reporting this, that shows that these communications were taking place. A massive amount of information was being sent from Seth Rich to them. And the investigator, federal investigator who wishes to remain anonymous, said, I have seen and read the emails between Seth Rich and WikiLeaks. He said the emails are in the possession of the FBI, while the stalled case is in the hands of the Washington Police Department. So the FBI doesn't want to investigate. The D.C. police don't want to investigate. And the family doesn't seem to want to know if the trail is going to lead to somebody that they like. I would want to know, regardless of where this trail leads, if it was my son. The investigator who had been hired by the family and who is a contributor to Fox News, Wheeler, said, I do believe that the answers to who murdered Seth Rich sit on his computer on a shelf at the D.C. police or the FBI headquarters. And again, the federal investigator was the one who came up with that exact number of emails and federal attachments, very specific, 44,053 emails. And they point out that it was just 12 days after Rich was killed when WikiLeaks published the DNC emails that appeared to show top party officials were conspiring. There's that word again, conspiring. Yes, they were conspiring to stop Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont from becoming the party's presidential nominee. And remember, we had WikiLeaks at the time come out and offer a $20,000 reward for information about the murder of Seth Rich. When Julian Assange was being interviewed, he said, we are very concerned. People are putting their lives on the line all the time. He said, look at the young DNC staffer, Seth Rich, who was just murdered in Washington, D.C. And they said, wait a minute, are you saying that he's the one who turned this? I'm not saying anything. He would back off of that. And nevertheless, they put out that reward. He strongly implied that he was the one who was behind it. And if you remember, the former UK ambassador, and we covered this back in December, former UK ambassador Craig Murray came out and responded angrily to the report that was published in The Guardian and elsewhere, saying the CIA concludes that Russia interfered to help Trump win the election. And he came out and said, BS. I'm calling BS on this. And they reported at the time, he said, I know who leaked them. I've met the person who leaked them. They're certainly not Russia. It is an insider. And that is exactly what Julian Assange said. He said, our source is not the Russian government. Our source for the DNC emails has not come from a state party. And again, this ambassador, who has more credibility? The people who are there with WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks has never told us anything false. We've gotten nothing but false claims and accusations that, frankly, don't hold water from the Washington Post and elsewhere. And, of course, the CIA. And Julian Assange replied to attacks against him by the CIA, both last year and this year. Today, he came out and said, CIA is the most dangerously incompetent spy agency. And I think he's absolutely right. He said this came after RT asked the CIA to comment on the assessment of a former agency analyst, Ray McGovern. We've interviewed him here multiple times at InfoWars. Alex Jones has talked to him many times. Ray McGovern suggested that the capability to falsify digital fingerprints, as exposed by WikiLeaks as part of its ongoing Vault 7 disclosure, cast doubt on allegations against Russia in connection with the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Ray McGovern said, could it be that the Russian hack, quote unquote, was really done by John Brennan of the CIA? If I were asked to bet on that, then I would bet that it was exactly that case. What does that mean? It means that these trumped-up charges against Trump, pardon the pun, are baseless. And again, I don't even think that it was a hack. I believe this information was handed over by Seth Rich or others to WikiLeaks. CIA Director Mike Pompeo had sparked concerns in April, reports RT, when he suggested that WikiLeaks would be described as a non-state hostile intelligence service. And so in response to that, Julian Assange reminds us that the CIA is the world's most dangerously incompetent spy agency. It has armed terrorists. It has destroyed democracies. It's installed and maintained dictatorships the world over. There are good men and women at the CIA. But if our publications are any guide, they work for WikiLeaks. You get that? You see, all we have to do is look at what happened the beginning of this week with the WannaCry virus. That is something that was created, curated by the CIA, lost by the CIA. The code was exposed. WikiLeaks was the white hat in this. I know they're going to blame WikiLeaks for this ultimately, but WikiLeaks were the ones that explained to everybody what the capabilities were. And they said, we will work with the various companies, whether it is Cisco, and they took them up on the offer, Google, who was not very interested, Microsoft, who was only moderately interested. And they said, look, a lot of these companies who have heavy contracts with the government are not interested in fixing these exploits. They put out the user manual so people would know what the capability of the government was and the way that the CIA is destroying our security, not enhancing it. And so when we look at this, where are we today? Tonight, as this is starting to really gain traction everywhere except in the mainstream media where they want to push back on it as a conspiracy theory, tonight we have a new conspiracy theory coming from more anonymous sources, coming out of CNN and elsewhere, saying that Comey wrote in a memo that Donald Trump had asked him to end the Flynn investigation. And I'll just leave it at this for the moment. What we have in the CNN story says CNN has not viewed the memo, but sources described it to CNN. So there you go. I guess we can trust that. Or can we? You know, today we had a series of tweets from Matt Drudge. He slammed the media blood sport of going after Trump. You can see the InfoWars article that we have where we lay out all the different tweets going back and forth between basically Matt Drudge commenting on the tweets that came out of Glenn Kessler, who is an employee at the Washington Post. Glenn Kessler talked about how there was applause as their Russia leak scoop breaks the Hollywood Access record for the most readers per minute, then came out shortly after that, said, correction, the most readers per second. So they're very excited about this. They were able to take over the news cycle all day. And with the exception of the Drudge Report, with the exception of InfoWars and Breitbart, Daily Caller, some others, the mainstream media, as I listed that at the beginning, they focused on this made-up story. This is a fake story, folks. It's a fake story. McMaster's came out, poured cold water on it, and we've talked about that. Was this something that McMaster set up? I don't know, but nevertheless, it has been thoroughly debunked by the people who were there, and nevertheless, it took over the entire news cycle for the day. And Drudge points out that we have the owner of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, who's personally motivated to engage in blood sport going after Donald Trump. Donald Trump said, hey, maybe we need to take a look at Amazon and break up this monopoly. Well, of course, that's the very reason why Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. It was a pittance for him to buy the Washington Post for $250 million. Let's put it in the perspective of what it would cost you to spend $250 million to buy the Washington Post. And why would he want this? He wants this, of course, because he wants to be able to protect himself in business. Anybody who wants to do business on a big scale today better pay off the protection racket in Washington, D.C. And you better have some friends if you want to start some new businesses like a satellite launch system, or if you want to have drone delivery. You better make sure that you got somebody to shut down the FAA or to give you exclusive privileges that other people don't enjoy. That's why the Washington Post is so important for Jeff Bezos. So he spends $250 million to get this. What would that cost you if we normalize that purchase price down to your income? You know, his income is only $1.6 million. That's his salary and compensation. But his net worth is really what you have to look at. He makes his money from the stock that is skyrocketing. Of course, Amazon's doing a great job. His stock should be going up. But his investment in the Washington Post is going to protect that, is going to allow him to grow that. So if we look at his net worth, last year his net worth went up $30 billion in just 20 minutes. I'm sorry, $6 billion in just 20 minutes. So that'd be $300 million per minute. So at the fastest he has made money, he could have bought the Washington Post for less than he made in 1 minute, for 50 seconds, as a matter of fact. Okay, so we could look at that and we could say, well, if you make $52,000, which is the average household income, that would mean that you could buy the Washington Post. If we normalize it to what you make, that would mean that you could have gone out and bought the Washington Post for 35 cents. If you was, if you had the kind of income that Jeff Bezos did, that's the kind of impact that it had on him to spend $250 million. But let's take another look at something that was his peak income. If we look at the stock income, that's really where his money is. His money went up by $30 billion. His stock holdings went up $30 billion last year. And of course, we could also look at Amazon's revenue, because that's really what it's about protecting. That went up by $30 billion last year. Now, if we normalize it to that and to your $52,000 that you make, that would be equivalent to you making $52,000, spending $433 to buy a newspaper. That's why the billionaires can control the information the way they do. Stay with us. We're going to be right back.
The reason InfoWars Life has 5-star ratings on major third-party sites is because I want products I'm going to use for my family. I take this, my family takes this, and then it funds the operation with the most hardcore, truthful information you're going to find anywhere. So what you find in our news is the same thing you find in our products at InfoWarsLife.com.
If I ever forget to take them, I have a noticeable difference. I don't feel good. The nascent iodine is one of the ones that was life-changing for me.
Yeah, I actually have just run out of my super female. I had a few bottles at my house, and I've been taking it again, hitting the gym once again. Very exciting, feeling great, looking good. So, and I know my hair is luxurious once again. So obviously the super female is amazing. I love it.
Nascent iodine is essential. Survival Shield X2. If there's one product that I would say is life-changing that I would suggest, it's Nascent iodine Survival Shield X2. It's got a 5-star rating.
It's a win-win. InfoWarsLife.com.